everyone. Welcome to episode 17 of the Superintendent Spotlight. Today we're going to focus on social studies, and in particular the parts of our social studies curriculum that relate to our work with the veterans in Hingham. So we're really looking forward to it. It's a little bit different kind of a program than we normally have when we focus on subject areas, but I have some very interesting guests, and I think that you will enjoy what you're going to hear about. In the first segment, we'll talk about a particular program that we're running that involves our 10th grade students at the high school. In the second segment, we'll focus more on different kinds of activities, more in what I would call the affective domain of learning that we have across the buildings. In particular, we'll focus on 2 schools here, but certainly in every school we have a lot of activities that celebrate and support our veterans, both in Hingham and beyond. So let me start by introducing my guests for the first episode. So to my immediate left is Andy Hoy. Andy Hoy is our Director of Social Studies in Hingham, K through 12. This is Andy's first year in this role, but Andy was a longtime teacher in Hingham, moved away to a different district for a while, and is back this year. So welcome to Andy. Next to Andy is Keith German. Keith is the Director of Veteran Services in the town of Hingham, also a trustee of GAR Hall, and you're going to hear a lot more about GAR Hall. And welcome to Keith. And next to Keith are 2 veterans who are very active locally in the different programs, but in particular in this program that we're going to talk about. And so we have Scott McMillan. And Scott, you're a trustee for the GAR Hall. And next to Scott is Ernie Sophus. And Ernie, you're the historian of the GAR Hall. And I'm going to ask Keith to talk a little bit more about what GAR Hall is for those who may not know. So let's start with Andy and talk a little bit about social studies in general. So we have lots of different themes, if you will, in the social studies curriculum. History is only one of them. So for those people who think social studies and history are synonyms, they're not. History is one of the aspects. And for the most part, at the elementary level, we focus on history in certain grades. So talk to us about the program as it evolves from K all the way up through 12 and what the focus is in each grade, and in particular those grades that focus more on the learning of history.
Sure. So I would say overall our social studies program is obviously kind of aligned and built off of the Massachusetts curriculum framework. So grades K through 2 are really focusing on kind of family, community, developing the young students' early kind of civic identity, forming that and building it, recognizing national symbols and holidays and so forth. The first real true history course happens in grade 3, which is Massachusetts history, really focusing on early colonial times and the Pilgrims, and also a little bit of Massachusetts geography, the various towns and cities, and looking at local history. Grade 4 is North American geography, and then history comes back at the forefront in grade 5, which is very early American history, and really the students' first real concentrated study of history, specifically in grade 5. At the secondary level, then we have kind of a balance of world history and American history. Grade 6 looks at ancient civilizations. Grade 7 is world geography and cultures. Grade 8 is, again, U.S. history, part 1 of U.S. history from the pre-Columbian societies, Native American societies and civilizations, up through the Civil War and Reconstruction. Then we have a 2-year study of world history in grades 9 and 10. World History 1 in grade 9 goes from kind of some review of the ancient civilizations and studying up to about the year 1800, believe it or not. So it's a rip-roaring ride throughout time. And then grade 10, which is the focus of the program we'll talk about, is modern world history, starting with 1800 right up until the present day. And it's a neat curriculum because we really do get into current events towards the end of the school year. And then grade 11 is a focus on U.S. history again, U.S. History 2, or also reviewing the early parts of U.S. history as well. Grade 12 culminates in electives, social studies electives. We do offer an advanced placement European history course, which is a really in-depth study of history, but we also offer many electives in the social sciences, so your economics, government, sociology, psychology, international affairs, and next year we're offering a seminar specifically studying World War II and Hingham's connections to it, which I won't talk too much about because that might be a future episode. So.
Okay, very good. And so tell us about this project with the GAR Hall, and Keith is going to fill us in on the history of that building, but with respect to this particular project of the walking tour that we do, it's not so much a walking tour, it's the kids walk to the tour at the hall from the high school.
Yeah, so this project really came out of several years ago. We had a department meeting at the GAR Hall when I was a teacher in the department, and Jim Kirkaldy was the former director.
And it was newly renovated.
Newly renovated, right. So we, as a department, walked down to the GAR Hall and learned about it as a community resource, and tried to brainstorm ways that we could leverage it for the purpose of educating our students. And there were two 10th grade teachers in particular, Melissa McCash and Jennifer Cross, who was a teacher in our department, who kind of came up with that initial brainstorm about bringing our grade 10 students. And the reason they thought about grade 10 students was because in that study of modern world history, 20th century history, we learn about World War I and World War II and the Cold War and the various conflicts and proxy wars that developed around the globe. So by the spring, the students have a good global picture of those wars and conflicts. And so the idea was, let's bring the students to the GIR Hall, let's have them view the artifacts, view the new exhibits, and most importantly, hear from the veterans who lived and served in those various wars and conflicts. And I guess it's sort of a cliche to say to bring history alive, but I think it really is true in this particular case. And you can learn things cognitively, but this is a good example of learning something emotionally, to really feel a connection to the content that you've learned and realize that there are human faces and human lives behind these stories that they've read about.
Right. Okay. So we walked to GAR Hall, and for those in town who don't know where GAR Hall is, it's on Main Street, and it's not far from the Central Fire Station. Been there a long, long, long time. Keith, tell us more about how old is the building and what was its original function?
Gladly, Dr. Gallo. So the GAR Hall, or the GAR Hall, actually stands for the Grand Army of the Republic Memorial Hall. It was erected in 1888 as a place for congregation and friendship and comradeship of those men that returned back from fighting in the Civil War.
And they were men.
Yes, at the time it was strictly men at that time. They had returned and needed a place for comradeship, share their stories, etc. And they were able to erect that hall, which was used quite often in town for ceremonies. As if you read the Hingham Journal at all in the Hingham Yesterday section, they commonly refer to it in there quite a bit.
Well, there were not a lot of other large meeting places.
Correct.
Loring Hall.
Correct. And one of the biggest draws of the time, too, is we had two sitting governors, at the time. And there was a governor's box there. So whenever there was a production or a show, the upstairs was reserved for the governor at all times, whether he came or not. That was always available for him. Like you mentioned, it was renovated some time ago. State and federal funds made it handicap accessible. We were able to, through CPC, get many, many grants and matching funds to restore all of the works that we have in there. We the trustees, refer to it as Hingham's hidden gem. So we're very fortunate to be on the Board of Trustees that oversees the artifacts that are in there that date back, like I said, to the Civil War. We have artifacts from World War I era, World War II, and all the associated wars up until the present conflicts.
Some of which you didn't even know were there. until the renovation.
Correct. Until the renovation, we found a lot of things that were under the stage. The stage had the old gas lamps for lighting. Once that was removed, there was a storage area under there. We found flags and banners that we've had restored. We've actually hired a museum curator, is that what he is? Archivist who comes in, and we were able to get those things restored and brought back to their original condition as close to as possible. We have an extensive display of uniforms, again, all periods, that were actually donated mostly by Hingham residents. So as Andy mentioned, you could walk through there and see someone's uniform with the ribbons and medals associated with it. There's placards that tell a little bit, for the most part, what those people did in town, and it's great to see the students from the high school walk through during that part of the presentation when they say, "Oh, I knew that guy. That was my mailman," or "That was a fireman I knew." And then we actually have live presenters that are there, myself included, Ernie, Scott, and several other members of the other associations, the fraternal associations, American Legion in town, and the VFW. But the building itself is town-owned property. It was deeded to the veterans of Hingham somewhere in a town meeting around 1940, around that time frame, as the Civil War veterans were starting to phase out, and they were rapidly dying at a rate which we now see the World War II, the greatest generation. Same thing is happening to them at this time right here in this period of time. But they knew they wanted that to perpetuate that history, and they left it to the veterans of town to care for it. It was put in a trust, and it's our job to keep it the way it is and to preserve it. Like we said, we like to think of it as it's a gem. It's a hidden gem. It is open to the public, although we don't have specific times like Old Ordinary or Old Derby yet. But we look to that in the future as having that open. It's definitely in museum quality state, and we want to showcase this to the town. And we're very fortunate to be in a partnership with over the last 7 years with Hingham High School. And it's great to see those kids that are long since graduated come back and say, "Oh, I remember when I went to GAR Hall and I saw this," and not many people have been in there. And now we have generations of kids they'll be able to enjoy that.
And I think I read once that at one point there were something like 210 or 220 similar halls throughout the Commonwealth, and now there are only about 80 that are remaining. So a terrific loss.
Right now, that 80 is probably nationwide. So there's 6 in the Commonwealth of Mass that are in existence, that are still standing, that are in that shape. Similar ones in neighboring towns, for instance, Rockland recently sold by their town, similar to some of the properties that we've had in town over the years. Your old building, the school department building, that they sell off eventually. We're very fortunate that we have the backing of the Board of Selectmen and the other departments to keep it up.
Right.
Of course, let me just mention that in addition to the fact that there were 200 in the Commonwealth, and there are only literally 8 or 9 or 10, there was a movement about 10 years ago. We don't really need the building, and maybe we should tear it down. And that almost occurred in our town.
Sure did.
But the gem issue prevailed.
Okay, well, we're going to come back to how we use that. While Keith is here on camera, though, I'd like you to comment a little bit on the Veterans House over on Fort Hill Street, the Commander Anderson House.
Yes, the Commander Anderson House.
We're going to talk about that in the second segment of it.
Yep, the Commander Anderson House is a 6-room, what we call an SRO, Signal Residency Occupancy, which means each of the residents that are housed there have their own bedroom, their own dormitory. They share common living conditions, meaning the kitchen is a common kitchen. It's 2 floors, so there's a bathroom on each floor, the bottom one being handicap accessible. There's a laundry room and a great room and a patio outside. And in order for a veteran, and our partner in this is the Father Bill's Mainspring group that is really known on the South Shore for housing homeless people to begin with. This is an offshoot of that program, which they specifically target veterans. And these are veterans that are either been on chronic homelessness or meet a very, very low threshold of income, and they're allowed to stay at the home for as long as they like. We like to think of it as more of a transitional place, and to get them educated, get them some sort of job skills if they can still work, and back out into society. And usually they move on. So we've had a turnover there in the last few years. Quite a few people have come and utilized that place. Recently, the Hingham High School has formed a club called the Veterans Appreciation Club. It kicked off this fall with a goal to provide assistance to all the veterans in town, but specifically they used the Commander Anderson House as a target for their fundraising. The boys and girls that are members of that club, I think there's over a dozen, were able to raise in excess of $600. They then approached the town of Hingham Veterans Council and asked, hey, if we raise a certain amount of money, would you match it? With the goal of providing, at the time, they wanted to provide Christmas and holiday dinners and at that and the like, which you can imagine Father Bill's is inundated with that type of stuff. So I asked the boys and girls, I said, what do you think happens after the holidays? Those people that live there or reside there still have a need, they're still hungry. A whimsical idea, I guess you'd call it, came up that, hey, why don't we try to provide a pizza delivery service? Because pizza for those men, and it is open to women, but there are currently 6 men that are there, don't get that. That's a luxury for them in order to get pizza. So they were able to approach a local vendor in town, and they're in the works right now currently, as we speak, hopefully putting that together to begin in the spring, and that'll carry them on through the rest of the year. So they'll have a weekly pizza delivery service there with the funds that they raised out of that club.
Okay. All right. So let's get back to the 10th grade walking tour. So I'm interested from Scott and from Ernie about what is there a set format that you use each year, or do you change it when the students arrive there? Do you have kind of a menu or a script of what you're going to do, or does it vary according to the year and the students in your past experience?
Well, as it started out 7 years ago, they came over at a single period time, like 55 minutes or whatever a single period is, and we found out that just wasn't long enough time to spend in the hall. So since then, they've changed it to 2 periods, a double period, and we have the veterans, one from each conflict. If we can find a World War II veteran now, he will get up and speak for 10 or 15 minutes in Korea War, and right on up till current times, and they'll spend a little time talking about their experiences in there. And then they break off and they would tour the hall. And I bring in a military memorabilia display from World War I up to present time. And the kids get a great kick out of that and see the differences of the, like a canteen from World War I is very similar to World War II, only it's made out of different, one was cotton, now they're nylon,
And so it's hands-on.
It's all hands-on. They can pick up a canteen, or they can pick up a bayonet, or something similar to that. So the time has kind of made a big difference in the double period. We have three time frames that they come over for 2 periods, and then they walk back to the high school. Another group comes over. So we're there from 8 o'clock until really, really closing time for the school, and.
Roughly around 100 students at a time?
100 at a time. We have the chairs all set up. They can ask questions of the veterans as they're up there talking, and then they get to tour the hall. Now, last year, Jim Kirkaldy, Andy's predecessor, came up with a scavenger hunt. And that really I think that really set, before they would just kind of mull around the hall and kind of talk to each other and stuff. Now they've kind of got to look at everything in there and get a sense of what somebody did or to look at that.
So Ernie, what would you say the kids seem to enjoy most when they come? Is it listening to the different veterans? Is it the tour? What do they seem to gravitate to?
That's an excellent question, and it's something that I think about often, because what happens, the students come over, and quite frankly, they're wrapped in attention once we get started. As was mentioned, as I think you mentioned, there are no more World War I veterans, and the World War II veterans are just devastated in terms of their viability in their life. We're at the point now where Korea is that era, 1950s. Those are old times. I know. But the important thing is that what is it that happens? Let me give you one experience actually two experiences. When you say it comes alive, you're absolutely right. When you hear someone who isn't here today, but whom we all know, Herm Mesmer, for an example, talk about Korea, and when he was a signal officer in Korea, and when he talks about being 13 months in a tent with some other men, this is an absolute fact. The students are just mesmerized listening to that conversation and to that reality. And that's what happened to him, and that's what they hear. And I'm convinced that really happens. It triggers in each student just something special. And I'll give you an example. Last year, after the session we had, and this is a true story. Some people say you're probably making it up, but I was over at the Dunkin' Donuts. That's a free plug. The Dunkin' Donuts on Gardner Street. And I was getting a coffee for my wife, and I'm standing in line, and over there were four young guys. It was 3:30 in the afternoon, so school was out, and they were having a coffee or whatever they were having. And I'm in line ready to pay, and one fellow jumps up and says, "It was you." I said, what are you talking about? Last week, we were at the GAR Hall, and I have to tell you, it was terrific. With that, I paid for my coffee. He said thanks, and I said thanks, and that's a true story. The point is that it's such a close relationship with having someone there, with someone that has seen it or talked about it or been there.
It takes the students away out of the book. It puts them in front of people that they see every day. Scott's a figure over at Bear Cove Park, which many of the students frequent over there, and they see him and they know him, and now they put that together with the trip.
And we might add, not just a figure, but a Citizen of the Year.
Correct.
Congratulations last year on that.
And I think it really does develop that kind of historical empathy, that they see the photographs on the wall of the fallen, and they recognize them as somebody that was their age, the age that they are right now. And they're really able to, looking at those photographs, looking at the slides that Herm and some of the other veterans bring in, to see them as young men, and they think of themselves in that place. And I think it really does resonate with them. And when we do the Pledge of Allegiance in the GAR Hall, they do the Pledge of Allegiance every day, but when they do it together as a group of 100 students in that particular building, it's a very special and unique Pledge of Allegiance.
They see the reverence that the veterans that are there in the hall give that. I think that it does resonate with them.
What are some of the common questions that they might ask? So you mentioned that there's a presentation for each of the conflicts, and then kids have an opportunity to ask questions of that person. Is there a common kind of
They ask about the food.
Yeah.
A lot of times they'll ask about the food,
How do you eat?
what did you eat, where did you eat, how did you get it out in the combat areas, and
Just normal everyday facilities. How did you, use the bathroom? Did you get to shower? And I guess they're shocked at some of the answers because those aren't the answers they expect. And we tell them firsthand what it was like.
I know Herman Messman says, that he got to go in to take a shower once a month even, and he would, they would just take his clothes and throw the clothes away, and they'd give him a new set of clothes, and then he'd be off again for another month in the woods.
If I could comment, there was a fascinating experience last year when we have several women who are members of the GAR, members of the Legion and of the VFW. And two of them were there, and one spoke, and she was an absolute hit. The students, particularly the women that were there, the students, the girl students, I can I call them that?
Yes.
At 17. They were just thrilled to see a woman talking. So she had been in Iraq. Am I right?
Yes.
And when she described what she did as a truck driver, they just came right into that picture, and it was terrific.
I bring my my battle gear with the weighted. I allow the students to pick it up. I tell them what the temperatures were like. They actually pick it up for a minute physically and see that there's a strain involved in that. We provide some of the meals ready to eat, which are the MREs. That's the food that we eat today. I do make a disclaimer: peanut allergy kids stay away. But we do allow them to try that. They're really they seem really excited about that because it's something that they don't get to do or partake in it at all in their life unless they physically know someone who's in the service, which is about 1% of the national population. So the fact of that happening is probably very slim.
So we talked a bit about what the students gain from this, both in terms of the knowledge, but also in terms of how it feels to be a veteran, how it feels to make sacrifices, even, mundane things like the quality and kind of food that you eat. But obviously, a number of the veterans participate in this and must get something out of it too. So what is it you think that the veterans gain from this mutual experience that you have with the students?
Well, I honestly believe that the veteran finally says in his heart, gee, somebody heard me. Somebody knows what happens. And there are many veterans that don't feel that way because it hasn't happened. After the Second World War, which was a massive war the whole globe was involved with, both Korean veterans and Vietnam veterans were kind of ignored. The country wasn't ready for new veterans. Now with what's happening currently and with the feeling that they did hear us, it feels like there's a satisfaction there of thank you.
I think a lot of them get to relive, that period of history. Like Andy mentioned, it brings them back. I think they actually, for that moment in time when they're describing what it was like and the things, they travel back and they're that young person again. They're that young man or woman, and they so desperately want to reach out to those students, again, just to perpetuate their own story, but to let them know that, this could be you. And it does, it bridges the gap, and it's good to see that that the students really take a grasp of it, and they're so well behaved, and it's a treasure to have them there to share the whole experience of the touching the artifacts, talking, and actually seeing somebody alive and talking to them and getting their questions asked. Like you said, there's a lot of the same questions that usually, did you kill anyone? That's usually the first question, or but we try to preach that so there's more to that. What we did, myself included, infrastructure in Iraq, setting up power, drilling wells for people to have fresh water that had to travel an enormous amount of distance to get fresh water. And I think they're surprised at that. I think they see a piece that there's more humanity to it. There isn't just the pulling of the trigger. There's a lot more that goes into what we all do collectively, and our stories that we bring to them. I think is fascinating.
Did you want to add anything to that, Scott?
Just a lot of the veterans don't normally get a chance to speak, like that. They talk amongst themselves.
Yes.
That's with the VFW and the American Legion. We have, monthly meetings, and they come in and they'll talk to each other, but a lot of them won't go and talk to their kids or any other,
Right.
And so it kind of gives them an outlet.
And what Scott just mentioned was the whole reason why the GAR was formed. Those men came back. They didn't feel common to their kinsmen here in Hingham anymore, that they had to congregate together and share those stories, which is what we still do today. I think that's true. Yeah, I didn't think of that.
Ernie, did you have some last?
I believe that when the veterans are in that class, I call it a classroom, in that classroom, and they're sharing, and then when they finish, and they're more apt to be active and involved in the Legion or the VFW, perpetuating what was done by all the veterans and what the future veterans will be doing, and maintaining this gem that we have here. they're able to get glued together, I believe, by virtue
Looking forward as well as looking.
I'm sorry?
Looking forward as well as looking back.
Exactly. And I think it just perpetuates it. And
building off of that idea of being active, we hope that the same thing happens to our students, right? That they, this is a real culmination of seeing citizenship in action and service in action. And I think they walk out of that hall really feeling that what we've tried to inculcate in them from grade kindergarten in terms of what it means to be an active citizen in a democracy. And there's no better example than these gentlemen that they meet at the GIR Hall.
remember what that student said, it was you.
Right.
Well, thank you all for being here. This has been a great discussion. And thank you for what you do for our kids and with our kids. It's such an important thing. And there are a lot of other aspects of what we do in the schools where there is that personal kind of connection. We teach a lot of lessons, but we don't always have kids being able to experience through someone else's eyes, a live person's eyes, what's really happening. So we appreciate that. Thank you. And we're going to take a short break, and then we're going to come back and talk to two of our elementary principals and a classroom teacher, and we're going to talk about the many other ways in which the schools can interact with our veteran population and support, in some cases, the needs of veterans, and also learn some greater lessons about life, about communication and about community service and about citizenship and patriotism and all of those kinds of things. So we'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. This is the 17th episode of the Superintendent Spotlight, and today we're talking particularly about the social studies program. In the first segment, we heard about a very special program with our 10th graders going to GAR Hall to learn some important things from veterans of the many different conflicts that our country has been involved in. But in all of our schools, we have programs that both support our veterans and celebrate their achievements and their many sacrifices, and all of our schools involve some sort of a component of that affective learning domain. You heard about the 10th grade program as well. At the high school, we have the club that was mentioned, the Veterans Appreciation Club. And also there, we have our band participating in the annual Veterans Day Parade and all kinds of other things. But we have 5 other schools, and 2 of them are represented here today, East School and Foster School, South School and Foster School, but similar activities to those you're going to hear about occur in the other buildings as well. So my guests in the segment are Andy Hoy, who was with us in the first segment, and Andy is the Director of Social Studies, K-12, and my other guest to Andy's left, Mary Eastwood, who's the principal of South Elementary School, and Debbie Stella, who's the principal of Foster School, and Dawn Marie Fanaki, who is a 5th grade teacher at South School. And we're going to really have them talk about some of the kinds of activities, including celebrations are big at the elementary level, and we do a lot of celebrating around things like Memorial Day. So I'll start with Mary and talk to us, Mary, about some of the things that have happened at South. South is here because it's been a long-standing tradition at South, even before you were principal.
Oh, absolutely.
To have these kinds of celebrations, and so we thought hearing about those and some particular classroom activities as well was important.
Absolutely, great. So generally speaking, as I'm sure it's true to all of the schools, and especially all the elementary schools, it's completely integrated in the curriculum to talk about history and life and, sort of thematically talk about it. The children start their day with morning meeting, and all of these topics are addressed constantly, but especially around the special days like Veterans Day, Memorial Day, or any other time of the year when we're have patriotic and traditional holidays. It's also integrated into the social studies curriculum. The children will wear red, and white, and blue at certain times. They learn patriotic songs and music, which we then sing in all school assemblies or at these events, the Memorial Day and the Veterans Day event. And we love to talk to them about their own family experiences, because as Andy said earlier, we start out with where am I in my community as a small child, K through 2, and it's so nice because a lot of the teachers have mentioned to us it's so impressive that they not only do they know that there are veterans in their families, but they know where those veterans have been. They know where they fought and why they fought. And I liked especially what was said in the earlier segment about history coming alive, and these guests make it real for the children. So therefore they love to do lots of things like write letters to veterans. They'll collect their Halloween candy and send it overseas. In particular, we had a safety officer named Officer John Marquardt, and he said that when that candy used to arrive, it was so incredible. He said, not so much for myself, I didn't want to eat all the candy, but to be able to hand a child in Afghanistan candy was incredible. So by him telling that story to our children at an assembly, it just made it so real for them, and it was so beautifully put in their life space. And it also teaches them gratitude, being involved, being part of something bigger than themselves, and also teaching about perspective. So many of the grade levels, I know kindergarten always makes a rainbow for the veterans and presents it. Second grade, in particular, there was one example where they wrote letters to one of our dads who came to our Veterans Day assembly, and they wrote him letters, and he put them at Westover Air Base on, an airplane, and then all of the other people in the service came to look at them all the time, and they wrote back to the children, and then he came to visit, and that just means so much, that personal connection to little children. So those are just some examples. They've done many care packages to veterans as well, and constantly writing letters, inviting people in. I know on September 11th, one grade level always writes letters to first responders. Many of them are vets, and they actually walk over to the fire station with them. So like Andy said earlier, it's really nice to teach in the classrooms, and yes, we need to do that all the time, but to then have the real experience where you go out and you do things. Certainly recently too, many of them were on the sidewalk when different soldiers came home, and when the Orlando family came back from the services for their son. So making it real for children is what's important, and that is done in every elementary school. And Dawn Marie will talk later about our specific ceremonies on Veterans Day and Memorial Day.
And I would say, thank you, Mary, that was lovely. And Mary, I think, did a wonderful introduction to everyone about the things that happen in our elementary schools. There are, in addition to that, Foster School also has a number of things that I think are very special to our families. One is that throughout the entire year we collect for the New England homeless veterans in Boston. We have a retired veteran who delivers for us. It's all under the direction of Miss Hunt, who's a first grade teacher. Again, making those connections of veterans who are in need and benefit every day by the things that we're able to bring and share with them. One of the other pieces in our, we have quite a celebration on Veterans Day, and also a school-wide celebration on Memorial Day. And something that is, I think, it may or may not be unique to Foster, but one of the things that we do is we have what we call the Foster School for Veterans Day. I'll talk a moment about that. Wall of Honor. And that is where any of our foster families can add a name of a veteran, either a family member or a neighbor or a special friend. And so when we have our Veterans Day celebration, our fifth grade students speak about the meaning of Veterans Day, share that with the entire school, and then we actually invite our veterans to come, and they sit in front of everyone with the family that they represent. And in addition to that, we read the names of the veterans who couldn't be with us, but were part of the family or special in the neighborhood. And our lists have grown to be so long for our veterans that now we only actually read the names of those children who are still with us. But in our main hallway, we call our gallery, we continue to post all the names of all the veterans. And we have almost 6 pages of names. Again, making those very special connections about the common good in the Commonwealth and being a part of something that's bigger than just who I am. And we do the same, something very similar for Memorial Day, but we have added over the last several years, the children would ask us, sometimes would bring the poppies and wonder what they were. So what we have done most recently is, thank you to our veterans, they bring us enough poppies for all the children, and we collect pennies for poppies, and all the pennies go to the veterans. But we wear the poppies at our Memorial Day celebration, and our fifth graders talk about Memorial Day. They tell the story of why we have poppies and why it's an international story. It's not just an American story. And at that time is when our list is shorter, but that is the time when we recognize and honor family and friends of our foster community that died when they were in action. And that, when we do that, the children stand, if it's their family member, and it's a very solemn, but it's very meaningful, and it makes a different kind of connection for families and children to understand. We, as Mary talked about, we are writing letters. Our Halloween candy goes, and we say thank you to the First Baptist Church because they're wonderful in getting everything where it needs to go. And our staff, when you brought up, Dr. Gallo, the Anderson home, for the last 2 years, and we've already had conversations with them for this coming holiday season. It is our staff who provides a holiday dinner and stockings with all kinds of good things for each one of the veterans that is at the home during that time. And it's something, I think it shows not only the connections that we have with our children and learning how those pieces fit together, but our staff taking on that little special piece that we feel very strongly about. And I think that when we talk about some of our connections last longer than others, and some of our connections are because we have family and friends who have been in either Afghanistan or Iraq, and so we make some of those even more personal connections. And this is actually a flag that was presented to our school from a battalion in Afghanistan for our continued and ongoing support to the battalion when they were there. And it stays again in what we call our gallery at Foster, so it's something that people can remember, can stop and look at, and is an ongoing part of that community building, that civic building, that we're part of our, particularly as Andy was speaking, when we look at the social studies curriculum, we start at home, then we move to our families, then we move to neighborhoods, then we move to schools, and the schools get bigger, and then we're part of Hingham, and it just expands really to the world.
And of course, the whole community service component, which is a big pillar, if you will, of our mission, our district-wide mission, and the community service component that really came out of the social studies department, seniors having to do community service hours. So community service overall is something really important, and only one of the affective things that we're talking about today. So I know that, so you do the Memorial Day service. I know that at Plymouth River, I think the way they do their Memorial Day service is that every year a different grade takes responsibility. But at South School, it's been the fifth grade responsibility. Right. So Dawn Marie, tell us about what you do.
So at South School, we celebrate in quite the same manner as Foster does, both for Veterans Day and Memorial Day. At our school, the fifth graders are kind of in charge as the leaders of the school to introduce the programs and then run with it. So at Veterans Day, we invite also all veterans, all members of the community that have a veteran in their family or their neighborhood or a close friend, and they sit up on our stage, and then we introduce them, and the child who's related to them is up on the stage with them, and they just have such pride at that moment, and they're so involved, and just it's so special. And then the fifth graders give us the history and why it's celebrated on the 11th day of the 11th month and all. And we say the pledge, which is always such even on an everyday basis, the pledge at our school, everyone just stops no matter what they do, and the children will stop in the hallway and just stand where they are and look at the nearest flag. So they really have a lot of respect for the country and for this personal level with the veterans, and it's beautiful to see. We also sing God Bless America the Beautiful, which is not the easiest of songs to sing, but we do that because the third stanza of it is directed right at veterans, and it's all about the veterans, so we like to do that. And then we end it on a real positive up note with Lee Greenwood's God Bless the USA, and it's just beautiful. There's never a dry eye of the adults in the auditorium. Memorial Day we also celebrate, and the fifth graders lead. It's a much more solemn service. The children walk into the auditorium silently. The fifth graders again take the lead, and they teach about the history and all, and it's lovely. And then we have some of our trumpet players play out the grade levels back to their classes playing taps, which is just, again, heart-wrenching. The pride that the fifth graders take in hosting these events, it makes me fill up now because it's just so beautiful to watch. It's lovely.
And we thank all of our teams and our teachers for doing all of that, because we know it's more to do, but like you just said, it's so worth it.
Doing it though.
Right, it's so worth it. Right?
Absolutely.
Did you have anything else you wanted to add?
I think it's all been pretty well covered, and I think what's really nice is that every school has their own flavor, but we see this a similar theme running through all of them, and I'm sure that East and the middle school and the high school also do all kinds of wonderful ceremonies. And I think what's really special is that when our kids come together, our students come together at the middle school and the high school, they've had a similar, a different yet similar experience, which I think is really nice, and that's what you really want to look for in all people, right? The similarities. So you can honor the differences and realize, that that's a wonderful thing, but also celebrate the similarities. And I think when they come together as a graduating class, they have a good solid background in civil education and also being involved in community service, and, especially thinking about their veterans and thanking them for their service, and realizing, this freedom did not come free. And I think it's something they definitely know at a very young age, thanks to everything.
And I think it's so wonderful that our community and our families respond so positively with sharing the story of their veterans or those that have passed, and wanting them to be honored and recognized and shared. And I think that's also a reflection of our community and our children and the families, that it is also important to them. We like to develop it.
Right.
We hope we're developing it at all of our elementary schools, but it's also present, I think, in our community.
Absolutely. It starts at the dinner table, right? In the homes. Yeah.
A lot starts there.
Everything does.
Very good. Well, thank you all. Have you been to any of these ceremonies?
I got to go to the Veterans Day service at Foster, and I plan on attending the Memorial Day at South. So certainly one of the fun parts about my job is getting into the elementary schools and seeing all the great work that they do at South and Foster, but at East and Plymouth River as well.
Okay. And I've been to some ceremonies at South, and of course there's always that musical component, learning the songs, and it's a great way for elementary children to bring lots of different things together, and the music and the art and the decorating and all of those things that are so important for kids to be active and involved. So
reaches every learning style, which is great. Yeah.
Right.
Sorry.
So thank you all for coming today and sharing. sharing. And I want to thank our audience for tuning in, as I always do. Tell you a little bit about a couple upcoming programs. Actually, we're going to focus on one particular teacher at the high school who's participating for the second year in a national program called Chrissy?
Oh, right, yeah. Understanding Sacrifice.
And Understanding Sacrifice. And that's a fascinating program. It involves a travel component and, again, very personal. And anyone who wants to get kind of a preview, there is a website for Understanding Sacrifice. And we're going to talk to one individual, and I think you'll find that a fascinating episode. Also, we will be focusing on our athletics program in an upcoming episode, and also a session where we meet with our school resource officers. We have 3, an elementary one who's shared, and one at the middle school and one at the high school. I think Notre Dame also has a resource officer in our town, and talk a lot about what they do, but also touch upon the different things that we're doing to enhance our security, as we are trying to do on a daily basis. So we hope that you'll tune in again. Until then, I'm Dorothy Gallo, Superintendent of Schools.